adab of a majlis to be as close as possible, similar to the prayer. If you don't need the walls, then we can try to not lean on the walls, inshallah. And my special request is if our phones can be locked away for a while. Some musallis, they get upset if we ever tell them before the prayer, please turn off your phones, etc. They're like, what happens if there was an emergency? I've never seen in my life a musalli actually pick up the phone in the prayer. If there was an emergency, he's still going to let the phone go. Right? So it's like, we make objections sometimes, but the objections don't really have a lot of value. Right? Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa amma ba'd. Respected elders, beloved youth, respected musallis, alhamdulillah, last week we covered a bit of the Seerah, and I wanted to focus on pre-prophethood, or before the age of 40 of the Prophet Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a lot of these events aren't normally covered in Seerah lessons, etc. So inshallah we can have those of us who have gone through the Seerah, maybe a bit of a review, and those who haven't heard it, then alhamdulillah. So last we left off with the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's about the age of 4. Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam came, and his chest was split open, and the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's first step towards prophethood began, right? Where his heart was cleansed so that he can be on the path of isma and infallibility. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam soon after this was returned to his beloved mother. So for the first 4 years of his life, he didn't really have his mom, and we know he didn't have his dad. Soon after, in about 2 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom demanded that Amina, his beloved mother, passes away. Maybe some of us here, we have lost our mothers at young ages. We have lost our fathers at young ages. Alhamdulillah, I have both my parents, so I cannot begin to even try to understand what you went through. Right? But we can understand from this that the greatest of human beings also went through something like that. So this is someone that we can follow and see how he dealt with the situation. Did he just look at it negatively and just give up on life? Or he moved forward and benefited the ummah? He's like, I have no father, I have no mother. What did he do? He said he became a father for the ummah. In a sense, he became motherly for the ummah as well. He gave the same rahmah and the same shafaqah that a parent would have. This is how we should be if we ever go through such masa'ib and such calamities. There are people, Muslims we know, that go through certain things like this. And they say soon after, why does Allah hate me so? That He took my parent away. He took my mother away. He took my father away. Why do we understand this to be hate? If this is hate, then Allah hates the Prophet. But Allah took the Prophet ﷺ's father before he was around, before he could even see him. And soon after, just 2 years of spending time with Amina, Amina was gone as well. So this is something that we can take a lot of lessons from, and we can take hope from, and we can take inspiration from if we ever go through such things. Those of us who have our parents still alive, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them long lives with afiyat, with khair. And those of us who have lost our parents, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala illuminate their graves and put rahmah in their graves, inshaAllah ta'ala. Amina, she passed away in Abwa, in a place called Abwa, between Makkah and Medina. I almost said radiallahu anha. Some people would say we should say radiallahu anha for Amina. Others say we should not say radiallahu anha. And I don't want to go into the theological differences on this, but I just want to point it out a bit. So with regards to Amina, the Prophet's mother, did she pass away as a believer or not? Some would say yes, she did. Others, they have a different opinion. They don't believe that we can say that she was a believer or not. And this is something that we should avoid, these type of discussions where they don't have a lot of benefit. There's two incidents I've heard of. There was one alim, one scholar of the past. His name was Mullah Ali al-Qari. He's a very prolific alim, prolific scholar. He wrote commentaries on hadith. The position of Imam Abu Hanifa, we have heard of Imam Abu Hanifa, one position attributed to him is that he believed the parents of the Prophet of Allah did not pass away with Iman. Now Mullah Ali Qari, he was a very staunch follower of Imam Abu Hanifa. He wrote 3 different books in defense of Imam Abu Hanifa's position. And to a certain degree, he became obsessed with this. towards the end of his life, he went through certain difficulties that his enemies would say that it's because of what he wrote against the Prophet's parents. Now, whether the reality of this is true or not, it's not for us to comment, but this is something that someone actually pointed out, and it became something difficult in his life. So there are things that come, there are Islamic discussions. Is it of benefit or not? The ulama can decide, but for us, we shouldn't delve into it. There was one contemporary alim, same thing, he would have many gatherings to prove that they did not die with Iman. Once he saw a dream of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet told him, leave my parents alone. Leave my parents alone. He said this himself. And after that, he changed on this. So we should be very careful with what we choose to discuss or not. So Amina, she passed away in a place called Abwa. We can actually visit her grave up in Abwa if we drive, but it's a bit difficult and you'll see police surrounding that area. They don't actually want us because unfortunately there are certain Muslims, they go to such places and they do certain things. I'll comment on this in a bit as well, the theological position there. But they do certain things at these graves which are absolutely inappropriate and impermissible. Bowing to the grave, asking from the grave, etc., right? These are things, because of such foolish acts, they stop us from visiting something that to a certain degree is worth visiting. Amina, the Prophet ﷺ's mother's grave. So the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, his mother passed away at the age of 6. 2 years later, his grandfather passes away, Abdul Muttalib. His grandfather is the one who took care of him after. Abdul Muttalib wouldn't allow, or his children feared to stay on his bed. It's like, we don't go near our dad's bed. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ was the only one that was allowed to be on his bed. Right? This was the special love that Abdul Muttalib had for the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, that he was allowed to stay on his bed. So Abdul Muttalib passed away at the age of 8 of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. Then we know what happens afterwards. Abu Talib takes over. Abu Talib, his very beloved uncle, very beloved uncle, but he passed away non-Muslim, as we will come to know, and all of us know. One thing I want to comment here is that those who are very close to the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, we shouldn't use them in a manner that perhaps could be disliked from the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. Recently, there was an award given to a non-Muslim because of some services that he rendered for the Muslim community, I believe. They call that award the Abu Talib Award. Right? That's what they call the award, the Abu Talib Award. So these things we have to be very careful with the Prophet of like this or not, because he was a non-Muslim that helped Islam technically. In South Africa, I spent a lot of time in South Africa. There were certain gatherings, Islamic gatherings called the Ijtima. The Tablighi brothers, they hold a certain gathering. It's called the Ijtima. Thousands of brothers come for these gatherings. Right? And they have a lot of security. And there was a Hindu brother, right? For free services, he would always provide, and he was the head of security. He just loved providing security for these programs. So they would jokingly give him the nickname Abu Talib, right? Like they would call this Hindu brother Abu Talib because he's the non-Muslim providing security. And I remember when I first heard this, it was funny, etc. But then I told the brother, this is inappropriate, right? To give Abu Talib this. Abu Talib is that very special non-Muslim that his punishment in the hereafter is actually reduced because of the Prophet ﷺ's du'as, right? So Abu Talib took over. Abu Talib took care of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ till very deep, well into the prophethood. Now, just a few instances during this time, and I just want to comment on something theological that will benefit us. That we shouldn't rush, some Muslims have this habit, we shouldn't rush to declare someone a kafir. Abu Talib, the Prophet of Allah ﷺ was helping him, they go on a business expedition. They go towards Sham. They go towards what we say, current day Syria. They meet someone, they meet a monk, a Christian monk. And he comes and meets them. Actually, the Christian monk goes out of his way to meet this group, Abu Talib, a few others, and the Prophet of Allah ﷺ. Abu Talib is like, I've been on this journey so many times, I've never seen you. Like, why are you? His name was Bahira al-Rahib. He comes and he's like, why are you meeting us now? He says, because I saw certain things. I saw trees bowing down. I saw stones bowing down, making sajda. I knew right away someone special is coming. Because these were the signs of prophethood. The final prophet, this is what's going to happen. That the trees will bow down for him. Stones will bow down for him. So I wanted to meet this person. And we know the Prophet of Allah ﷺ was in that group. So Bahira came, he wanted to meet the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, and he told the Prophet, you have the signs of prophethood. He even looked for the major sign. There was a certain seal below the Prophet ﷺ's shoulder. There was a certain mark there that showed that this person is going to be a prophet. And the Prophet of Allah had this. Now, what was his main reason besides seeing the Prophet of Allah ﷺ? He wanted to warn the Prophet of Allah. Because they were on the way to Rome. right? They were on the way to Rome. And the Romans, they also knew that the final prophet is coming. And in their books and their understanding, and their priests told them that the destruction of your empire will take place at this man's hands. So Bahira warned them, do not take Muhammad forward. Do not take Muhammad forward, danger lies ahead. Right? So even at this point, the Prophet of Allah was protected from Allah in so many different ways. And this Bahira, there are some reports that he even accepted Islam as well. What do I want to mention the theological point here? What were the trees doing? They were making sajda. What were the stones doing? Making sajda. Sajda is something which is not inherently kufr. Meaning, if we see someone making sajda to something else, we can't automatically say this person committed an act of kufr. Why? Because prior to Islamic Sharia, sajda was considered permissible as a type of respect. You can bow down to someone as a form of respect. As we know, the angels bowed down to Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. We know Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam's parents bowed down to him. And here we know that generally creation outside of human beings and jinn are considered muwahidun, are considered those who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Would the trees who acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do or commit an act of kufr? Now why am I mentioning this? Because unfortunately there are Muslims that commit erroneous practices in the name of Islam. They will go to the graves of certain people, like Amina for example. They will go to the graves of awliya. They will go to the graves of pious people, and for some reason they would bow down. They would make the sajda. In our Islam and in our Sharia, bowing down as a form of respect is haram. But it is not inherently kufr. It is not considered kufr, because if you call it kufr, meaning no matter what, in all situations it is kufr, then the angels have committed kufr. The trees have committed kufr. Then the stones have committed kufr. Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam's parents have committed kufr. We should not rush in issuing fatwa of kufr. Unfortunately, many of us who don't know Islam, many of us who have not educated ourselves on Islam, we are so quick to judge the next person and say he has committed an act of kufr. Now, I'm not saying what they do is correct. This is absolutely haram. You can't bow down to graves, etc. But their intention is not, I'm bowing down to this person because I believe this person to be Allah or a ma'bud. It is because of some weird form of respect and veneration they want to give. So we can understand from this incident as well that sajda is not inherently kufr. Especially if we go to countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you go to any of these major graveyards, you will see enough people. The strange things they do there, right? They'll visit the grave and they'll walk backwards afterwards. They don't want to show their back because it's a type of disrespect. They're bowing down. They do a lot of strange things, making dua, They consider these people like a type of qibla. They have big parties around it, flowers and tea and all these types of things that they give for these dead people. Absolutely incorrect, absolutely erroneous. But just because something is bad doesn't mean it's kufr, right? This same thing applies to other situations as well. For example, the Shia, right? The Shia, generally, they have a lot of evil practices. I'm not saying the Shia do not have evil practices, but to just treat them like kafir is also incorrect as well. Because they do believe in Allah and His Rasul. But their practices render them to be mubtadi'un and fusaq. That they are considered innovators. They are doing wrong practices. And they are considered sinners because of some of the things that they do as well. But just because someone does something bad, you can't just label a fatwa of kufr on them. And we have to be very careful, especially the youth, because we do these things. We see someone doing something wrong, kufr right away. Someone goes to martial arts dojo. They bow to their sensei a bit. Muslim kid sees that kid. It's Muslim and a Muslim. Comes later, it's like he committed an act of kufr. How could he bow down to someone else? How could he do something resembling sajda? Now, as a Muslim, I would tell any Muslim who goes to a martial arts dojo that the parents should tell this teacher, look, as a Muslim, we don't bow down in this sense. Right? The Prophet of Allah forbade such things. He forbade inhina, bowing down in this sense, and he forbade sajda as well, a form of respect. We don't bow down to our senseis, etc. Right? And most senseis, what I've understood, what I've explained this to people, they understand. Right? This is something that we don't do. Right? But it is not kufr. It is not kufr. So the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see what happened with Bahira al-Rahib. Right? The stones are making sajda for him. The trees are making sajda for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He comes back. What does he do in this youth? Like, what does he do at this age? He's about 12, 13, 14, at that range right now. The Prophet of Allah was a shepherd. He used to guard sheep. And he mentions that, if not all, he mentioned every prophet was essentially a shepherd. Every prophet was essentially a shepherd. Sometimes we get so focused on titles and stuff like that. I'm a doctor, I'm from a family of engineers, I'm from a family of ulama, etc. The Prophet of Allah, such a humble job. He was a shepherd at this. And being a shepherd actually helped him perform his prophetic duties. Because shepherding gives you certain qualities which will help you run everything. And actually we are all shepherds in a certain way. The Prophet of Allah said, "Kullukum ra'in." Every single one of you is a shepherd. The father is a shepherd of his family. The mother is a shepherd of her family. Everyone to a certain degree has something that we govern, right? That we treat in a certain way where we control and we try to establish certain policies with. The Prophet of Allah said, we are all shepherds. Be very careful in the way you guard and govern. Be very careful in the way you guard and govern. So the Prophet of Allah was a shepherd. What qualities can we gain as a shepherd? And I'm not inviting us to be shepherds here, right? But it's something that we should not look down upon as well. First and foremost, the quality of sabr. This sheep is running there, that sheep is running there. Sabr. It gives you the quality of being patient. Tawadu. Very beautiful quality that very few people have. Humility. It gives you humility. It humbles you. You're taking care of sheep. Sheep poops on you. This thing happened. Who are we? Who are we? Our beginning is some dirty water. Our end is death. Who are we to have any pride? How many hours we are spending in the bathroom? And we can have such pride. We are such powerful creatures. And this is what we do to pass our time. We're spending minutes and minutes and minutes sitting on a toilet seat. Who are we to have any pride? Who are we to be arrogant in any way? Being a shepherd, second quality, it gives you humility. Next, rahma and shafaqa. You're taking care of the sheep in a very gentle way. Because if you don't, then the sheep are running away and so many difficulties can come with that. It also gives you courage. As a shepherd, you have to deal with wolves. You have to deal with different creatures. You have to deal with thieves. You have to deal with so many different things. Being a shepherd gives you this. These qualities are developing him for prophethood. A prophet has to have courage. A prophet has to have humility. A prophet has to have patience. A prophet has to have rahma and shafaqa. And these are all qualities that we should all try to bring within ourselves. So the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he was a shepherd. Right? He was a shepherd at this tender age. Some things that happened during his life at this time. Many of us may not have heard some of these things. These are things that we should consider in our lives. First, around the age of 15, there were certain battles taking place. This is the first time the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam experienced war, experienced battlehood. Obviously, not in a religious sense, but he experienced battlehood. The hurub al-fijar, or you can say the wars of aggression, the wars of sin, actually, because these wars were based off something called tribalism. And all of us to a certain degree might have this, and inshallah, we should consider it and we should completely disregard it. And I'll explain. There were different tribes. We know there was the Quraysh, there was the Hawazin, etc., etc., etc. And for the flimsiest of reasons, they would go into battle. They would just fight each other. One person committed some type of dhulm on the next person. This person's tribe is defending this person. The other person's tribe is defending this person, and they're battling it out. There's a sickness that many of us have, tribalism. In our form today, nationalism, and essentially giving preference to our family. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if Fatima radiallahu anha, she committed theft, I would cut her hand. This favoritism, if we see someone hitting our brother, right away, what are we going to do? Punch that person. Perhaps our brother committed it wrong. Did we ever think of that? Perhaps our brother did something in that sense. Obviously, save your brother, stop the fight, right? But what we would do, most people, we would jump that person. We would attack first, then ask later, right? We see our cousin getting attacked, the same thing. Our child versus another child. Right away, we assume that our child is right. Why is that? Can our children not be wrong? This tribalism, this favoritism. It's a Pakistani brother and a Bangladeshi brother. I'm a Bangladeshi, no matter what, I'm going to help the Bangladeshi brother. And quite possibly the Bangladeshi brother could be committing dhulm on the next brother. Right? The Pakistani brother sees the Pakistani brother, he helps the Pakistani brother. Why? Nationalism, tribalism. It's racism. We are not fair people. We are not just people. That who's right or wrong. This hurub al-fijar was completely based off such things. That look, my tribesman is fighting that guy's tribesman. I'm going to take his side no matter what. I don't care whether he's right or wrong. He's from the same tribe I am from. This tribalism, the Prophet of Allah, is one of the things he came to wipe out. And unfortunately, because of the world wars and because of the British, they have made all these lines, and this is how we live our lives. To such a degree, even in our World Cup support, in our sporting event support. Imagine we get into fights like this. Like I mentioned, I spent a lot of time in South Africa. Some of the first questions a South African would ask another South African: which team do you support in soccer? And not even as African teams, European teams, right? Manchester United and this, etc. I'm not into soccer, but like they're into. That's one of the first questions. Not even what's your name, what team do you support? And we know what types of crimes are committed just in allegiance and loyalty to sports. In America, it's not that bad, but sports hooliganism is actually a sickness in those countries. The sport of soccer in England is like a religion. It's completely a religion over there. And some of us have fallen into such things. World Cup times, I know personally, in Bangladesh especially, they're very big on supporting Argentina or Brazil. They love the Argentinian teams and they love the Brazil teams. And I know both, and they'll put flags and everything. Like in like a small, poor Aryan village, they'll have an Argentinian flag or a Brazil flag during the World Cup, etc. Right? I know of incidents where one would try to attack the other house because of the other team they're supporting. This is what the Prophet came to condemn, and we are bringing such things alive. This is exactly what happened at his tender age of 15. He saw what the Quraysh were doing, he saw what the Hawazin were doing. Just tribalism. My tribe versus your tribe. My country versus your country. My sports team versus your sports team. My child versus your child. My brother versus your brother. Allah protect us from such sicknesses. Right? As a general advice, I advise everyone to try to bring this quality. If you're ever in a situation where you're solving a dispute, and may Allah protect us, because we don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to be a judge. Let others deal with that, right? Always listen to both sides. Always listen to both sides. The other side could be the musalli you hate the most, right? The person you can't stand him. His presence is bothersome for you. It doesn't matter. You listen to both sides. Especially for me, my personal practice I'll mention. Unfortunately, the position I am in, I have to deal with disputes. If it's a family member of mine versus a non-family member, wallahi, I assume my family member is guilty until otherwise proven innocent. This is how I work. I assume my family member is wrong, and I try to work around it, right? This is my personal practice. It took me a long time to try to discipline myself to that manner. It's very tough. Your wife comes to you. She's like, all these women are saying this. You put your wife in this place of employment, all these women are doing, it's just complaints and complaints. If you're always going to listen to your wife, no, you got to see what the other side is saying. Because problems happen, especially wife and mother-in-law, right? Murder-in-law, right? According to some women, right? Murder-in-law, right? It's the wife and her mom, your mom. Very difficult situation. A lot of you guys are going to get married. Wallahi, it's a real thing. Wallahi, it is a real thing, the wife and mother-in-law. May Allah protect us. And you have to be very, very careful as a man in between. Because you love your mom, and hopefully you love your wife, right? Right? Hopefully you love her. But it's like they give different things. Your mom, there's a lot of benefit, right? Like it's a situation we have seen, like a woman, she will provide certain benefits and no one else can. And we know what I'm talking about, right? Now, if you don't take her side, things happen. It's difficult at home, right? Again, you have to tread very carefully. So again, the hurub al-fijar, it's complete tribalism. Be very, very careful in choosing sides. Don't ever be in that position. But if you are in that position, weigh everything and think like a Muslim. The next thing which happened, we hear about social justice, right? A lot of the young people, they know social justice. And wokeism, I'm woke, right? And these type of things. A lot of these people, they have good intentions, but unfortunately, because they're not doing it under an Islamic paradigm, they fall into un-Islamic practices. Wallahi, Black Lives Matter. But the way the Black Lives Matter movement does certain things, it's un-Islamic. Right? They're completely against the family system, right? They are completely against traditional and conservative ethics. There are so many things like that. Wallahi, Black Lives Matter. But to join such movements and causing trouble and ruckus and riots and different things like this, where we find out the people at the top are actually corrupt people that are just taking money for themselves and stuff like that, all these things, if it's not done under an Islamic paradigm, eventually, it will be injustice. In the name of justice, injustice will take place. So the next incident in the Prophet's life was social justice, but the prophetic way. And wallahi, it's a very beautiful story. A man comes, and it's the classic poor versus rich. A man comes. He comes to Mecca, and he does business with a respected person of the community. He sells him goods. That rich person, he knows he can take advantage. Oh, by the way, this man's a foreigner. Right? Foreigners get taken advantage of all the time. He buys the goods, he decides not to give him the money. Now this person, he's like, what am I supposed to do? I'm a foreigner, how am I going to get my money? This is my livelihood, I'm not going to survive here. So he goes to certain elite members in the Quraysh community and he says, look, this guy took all my money. And everyone's like, oh, he's a respected person. What are we going to say? He's a big person of the community. He's the president of the masjid. What are we going to do? I'm not attacking the president of the masjid, right? I don't want anyone to take that. I'm just giving an example, right? He's a respected community member. Now, eventually he gets to the right person. And he's just crying because he's a madloom, he's oppressed. He reaches one of the uncles of the Prophet of Allah, even though they were non-Muslims technically, but they had ethics, they had certain things, they had humanity. Zubayr ibn Abdul Muttalib. He's like, dhulm taking place in the haram? Dhulm taking place here? No. He gets a few tribes together. They form an alliance. And they go to this wealthy person and take everything back and hand it to him. This was the Hilful Fudul, Allah Akbar. This was the alliance of complete virtue. That these non-Muslims did this. This was proper social justice, Allah Akbar. And the Prophet of Allah was part of this. He says, I would not, the Prophet of Allah said, I always give this example because it's the easy example. He says, for me to trade my presence in that moment, I would not be willing to trade that presence for red camels. I always mention red camels are essentially like $300,000-$400,000 now, right? It's like fancy cars. So when the Prophet of Allah gives such examples, he gives examples so the community understands. For the Arabs and the Sahaba at the time, a red camel is like, oh, it's like me talking about Maseratis and Lamborghinis. We all understand those are fancy, nice cars, So the Prophet of Allah said, if someone gave me those things, multiple of those things, I would not have traded for the presence and that moment I spent during that moment where justice took place in the face of injustice. That's all. If we are ever involved in taking care of those people who are madloom and oppressed, right? And a lot of people are in America and others, right? But we do it with an Islamic paradigm. We do it under Islam. We do it with the guidance of mashayikh and imams and ulama and scholars. We don't do it in our own way. Because very often we're going to ally with the non-Muslim. And I'm not against alliance with non-Muslims. But when we have only the non-Muslims with us, we don't have ilm and scholarship with us, we fall into injustice. And that is what's happening with a lot of these woke people, right? A lot of these social justice warriors and these types of people, right? These are things we have to be very, very careful. Inshallah, I'm going to conclude soon. Some of the brothers are looking at the time, I can see, right? So, we are at Hilful Fudul. We are at Hilful Fudul. This is what happened with the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can jump a few years. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gets married. Allah Akbar. Who does he get married to? He doesn't get married to a very young virgin woman. He gets married to a woman significantly older than him who wasn't a virgin. Khadija radiallahu anha. And what a marriage, Allah Akbar. Just understand from one incident you can appreciate what a marriage this was. After Khadija's passing, sometimes Khadija's sister would come knocking on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's house to visit. And he would hear her voice and she sounds just like Khadija. And the Prophet of Allah would just get so happy. How many people can say they have marriages like this? Just hearing his wife's sister's voice gives him that joy. This was the marriage the Prophet of Allah had Khadija with a woman 15 years older than him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A woman who was not a virgin, previously married. A woman who gave him the best children. Fatima radiallahu anha came from that union, Allahu Akbar. So the Prophet of Allah is at the age of 25. And guys, I'm not saying, some people have this thing, I want to get married at 25. Get married when it's right for you. Get married when it's right for you. I see some children, they're pressuring their parents, I'm 25, get me married. The Prophet got married at 25. Why can't I do it, etc. Marriage is not something, it's not a game. It's not just numbers. Get married when it's right. It's very difficult to assume when it's right, but having some money is good. Some people, out of just a certain type of enthusiasm, they just want to get married, right? To fulfill their lust. No, having a decent job, having money, these are actually good things. We just think these are cultural things. No, Islam demands that the man provides nafaqah, that the man provides some type of support for the wife. If you don't got money, how are you going to fulfill this obligation that Islam puts upon you, right? Going through an education helps for a lot of things, So, youth especially, right? Let's not get into this enthusiasm because the Prophet of Allah got married at 25, we should try to get married at 25. But 125, especially now, I would say mid-20s is good. The average person, they get out of college maybe 22, maybe 1-2 years working, etc. 25 is a decent age, alhamdulillah, right? We should try and maybe keep that as a target, but work with the parents. And parents, work with children, right? Parents have to work with the children too. We come with our cultural expectations. No, you gotta have a house first, you gotta do this, do this. So this guy's 35, trying to get married. This woman now also, 30, 32, it's so difficult for them, right? So difficult. So the Prophet of Allah, he was working with Khadija radiallahu anha. Why did he like her and she liked him? She saw his honesty, he saw her ethical morals, etc. And it was just a match, literally a match made in heaven. Literally a match made in heaven. The Prophet ﷺ married Khadija radiallahu anha. Just the final point I just want to comment on. There's so many things we can mention from the Prophet ﷺ's union with Khadija radiallahu anha, that we have this thing, that this stigma with women that aren't virgins, right? That woman, now we as men can have preferences. You like a woman 5'5", fine. You like a woman that's very tall, fine. You like a woman that's a bit short, you like a woman with a certain complexion, that's fine, right? As long as it doesn't fall into racial tendencies or just like very, very weird expectations from our culture. But we all like what we like, right? We like what we like, right? I'm not questioning that. But there is a stigma that as of a woman who's not a virgin is like subhuman. She's not even human. Look at, she wasn't a virgin. And the Prophet of Allah's first wife, young man, he was, you can say probably the best suitor at that time. He could have probably had anyone. But he wanted her for her virtues. He wanted her for her qualities. Let's focus on these things. We hear all the time, but it's so important. Wallahi, I just got married 2 years ago, a lot of people afterwards, especially the pandemic, we know everyone got married during the pandemic, right? So many people are just getting married because it's cheaper now, and it's easier to save social distancing, so many different things. You save 10, 15K, you know, like, there are, like, you know, these financial intentions behind, you know, like, so, like, a lot of people got married, and also, we all, like, loneliness, right? Who wants to be lonely? Pandemic for a lot of people was very lonely. I was in Pennsylvania, somewhat of a conservative state, so I didn't experience it as much, but I spoke to a lot of my neighbors. I'm talking about husband in one room, wife in one room, children in another room. I don't know how bad it was, but I'm assuming it was kind of like that for it was lonely. It was tough for a lot of guys, especially the young man at this time. He sees people getting married, a lonely woman as well. So the pandemic led to a lot of these, right? The pandemic led to a lot of these things, right? So those of us who are trying to get married and who are, those of us who have such expectations, etc., and who want to get married, the main focus should be qualities. The Prophet chose Khadija over her qualities, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with beauty, with youth, etc., right? But the main thing is qualities. You want someone that has good qualities, because wallahi billahi tallahi, right? Beauty will fade. Beauty will fade. And if it doesn't fade, that woman is spending your money to look good. A lot of your money, you know? Different surgeries, different things like that. You know, all the different, I don't know, Botox and all. And like, I'm not obviously very an expert on that field, but a lot of these things, you know, these women are 60 looking like they're 30 now, you know, like, they're going through this process, but that costs money, you know? It's going to be your money that's going to spend, right? So, like, beauty will fade. The main thing are qualities. When you go into that stage, you know, it shouldn't be such that she has to be a, you know, like a model, but she can have the worst qualities in the world. The main thing should be qualities, right? And obviously this same advice is applied, but obviously men are here, that's why I'm speaking from that perspective, right? But when we go to that, as the Prophet of Allah saw Khadija's beautiful qualities, as Khadija radiallahu anha saw the Prophet's beautiful qualities, marriages should be based off sifat. Marriages should be based off qualities. So when you go, you should have your questionnaire. You should see what's really important in life, you know? Do you want to have children? You know, what type of relationship do you have to your parents? Do you obey your parents? You know, these are the right questions to ask, you know? What do you think of service? What do you think of khidmah? You know, what do you think of these type of things, you know? Do you think people should be helped, you know? If my mother fell down right now, would you rush to help her, right? Would you call my mother weekly? Would you speak to my father every now and then? These are the right questions to ask. For us, all right, you know, like, the first question is like, okay, I've literally had a friend, wallahi, this is funny, wallahi, this is what he did. He visits a woman, right, and it's guarded, obviously the parents permitted it, and his first question was, do you have nice feet? And you know what she did? Wallahi, he told me this. She literally looked down and she's like, I think so. Like, should that be our focus, you know? Like, and it was funny, like, because he told me he was a bit scared. He didn't do it intentionally, right? But obviously you get past your icebreaker. Maybe this is a good icebreaker for you guys if you're ever in that situation. You could mention this incident, right? This happened. This definitely happened with my friend, you know? But the main thing, qualities. Good qualities. Islamic qualities. Morals. You know, who do you look up to? How do you spend your time? Is your entire day spent on Instagram, TikTok, and all these things? Do you want your wife, for example, and obviously this applies to us, but do you want your wife, instead of focusing on the baby, she's just on TikTok, right? Just Netflix, Disney Plus, or whatever people are doing nowadays. Qualities. So respected youth and respected elders, you know, some people are thinking about 2, 3, and 4 as well, you know, like, right? And you never know the way America's going, right? The way America's going, inshallah, why not? The more freedom in terms of Sharia, that's a good thing, right? The more freedom to the Sharia is a good thing. So those of us, inshallah, these are the main things to focus on. It's not just beauty and jamal, right? Real jamal is in qualities and sifat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to be like the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He is the ultimate role model, right? He is the ultimate person in every way possible. This month of Rabi'al Awwal is not just Rabi'al Awwal. It's for our entire lives to be like Rabi'al Awwal. It's our entire lives to be like the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. These incidents are not just things to laugh at and to cry at. It's to really bring into our lives. May Allah give us tawfiq.
Shaykh, we'll go for next slide.
Respected Musallis, inshallah, this coming Friday, October 14th, we are having a family program. Our wives, inshallah, can come. Our children can come, inshallah. Dinner will be provided. There will be a Seerah program as well. Inshallah, I will be delivering a lecture. We'll have a guest speaker and a guest qari. Actually, they're the same person. So we'll have a guest speaker and a qari. Qari Nazrul Islam. Many of you may have seen him. He goes to a lot of events. He's coming, inshallah, from Long Island. He's a very accomplished qari, a very accomplished reciter of the Quran. And inshallah, there'll be 2 Seerah lectures. And inshallah, dinner will be provided. We come, we can benefit from the Seerah of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's a Friday night. We can be spending our Friday nights in so many different ways, right? Why not come and take benefit from, inshallah, the deen and learn about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam life a bit more. So inshallah, this coming Friday, a family program for the wives, for the children, and dinner will be provided. Inshallah, 2 lectures and inshallah a qira'at as well from a very accomplished qari, inshallah. May Allah give us tawfiq.